Right. Hmm. I'm going to say something that I think a lot of people might disagree with.
Nuhazet Diaz Cano is an actor from Tenerife. Since graduating from Bristol Old Vic last year, he has gone on to work at the Sheffield Crucible with the BBC Radio Drama Company and has recently filmed a TV series for ITV. Nuhazet Diaz Cano, welcome to the Actors Actuality Podcast. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, Alex. Very good. How about yourself?
I'm good. Samuel, how are you?
Very good, thanks, yeah.
We wanted to start with audio and the world of audio. For the listeners who don't know, Nuhazet recently won the Carlton Hobbs Prize. Congratulations. I'm not jealous. And he worked with the BBC Radio Drama Company for 5 months, ?
5 months. That's exactly what it was, yeah.
Wow. We wanted to know, what is the actual process of recording a radio play? How does that happen?
In all honesty, it completely depends on the company and the production itself. I was lucky enough to be a part of a Big Finish production for a Doctor Who radio play. And that was right before I started Carlton Hobbs. And it was like a different world in like how they kind of create the atmosphere and how they have people in the room and everything like that. So it does change quite a bit. And I think maybe it comes down to a situation of money and resources and things like that. But like with Big Finish, you literally just had all of the actors all in one room and you just went through the scenes like as they came. You went through the script bit by bit. Sometimes they, obviously, most of the time, they don't really do things chronologically. They sort of rattle things off by who they've got in the building, at what times, for how long, things like that. But then you go into the BBC where they take, creating an environment very, very seriously. You have different types of rooms with different types of sound absorption or size. They'll sit there and they'll create like a mini set for you sometimes. Like if your characters are sat down at a table having a cup of tea, you'll have a table in front of you with chairs and cups and teas and things to actually sip on. And, then they'll have enclosed walls to recreate the environment of having like a small room. Or if you go, they had something called the Trap, which is like a little hallway that you go down right into like a corner, which has like a mic, and then it's all surrounded by pillows and mattresses, and the walls are all soft material, so it'll absorb the sound, so that when you like shout lines from out of there, it sounds like you're in a big wide open space, because obviously the way sound travels is the second it hits something, it bounces back and creates a different type of sound. And so, we did all sorts of things. We did airplanes, we did kitchens, we did bathrooms, we did fields, we did trenches, and each one of them is slightly different. They even bring out, they have like these buckets of different material, like gravel or like film tape that they use to recreate the sound of like walking through grass. They just like bundle up a massive bunch, spread out all over the floor, and you'll just be walking on the spot to recreate the sounds of walking. And I think that's why the BBC is so incredible when it comes to their radio plays, because the specificity and the recreating of the actual environment really brings you into the world, which I think is different. And it's the same thing with things like The Archers, it's up at the BBC studios in Birmingham. They have a similar setup, but the studio in like BBC London is absolutely huge. And it's just, you always start regularly with a read through, like with most things. You have the whole cast come in if they're all available. And you go through a read through, and I can't lie, there's not really much sitting down, chatting, text work, anything like that. You read it through once and then you just go straight in. You literally, once you finish the read through, you have like a 10-minute break, and then you just wait for your name to be called to come in for a scene.
How long did you have the script for before you started recording?
It depends. Sometimes you'd get booked in like a couple of weeks in advance. Sometimes you get booked in, like it depends on when they have fully secured everything, right? Especially with Carlton Hobbs, it was a fantastic opportunity But obviously, as a part of the rep company, you're there to help fill the world, right? Whereas sometimes you do get the opportunities to play bigger characters. A lot of the time, you are, playing 4, 5, 6 different people, and so it's good. Sometimes they give you. I mean, once I had like 3 weeks before I had a script 3 weeks before I even stepped in the room. But then another time I had the script a week before I stepped in the room. But I think the directors and the producers at the BBC do a really good job of contacting you when it comes to like speaking about the play a little bit beforehand and like asking if you have any questions, anything like that, especially when you have like loads of different roles to fill. Like they kind of just ask you a little bit about it, see how you're feeling and see what direction you want to take the characters in, things like that.
I have a question about lines, because we've been taught that you don't learn the lines for audio drama. How do you still find the truth in those performances if you're reading off a script?
I think the beautiful thing about radio is that because you don't learn the lines in the same way, there is an element of reactiveness. And you're like, because you don't know the lines like that, you have to be so locked into the people that you're doing the scene with, so that whichever way they take the script, because it doesn't matter how many times you read the script, until you're in the room with someone, you have no idea what direction they'll take it in. And so with radio, because there's not like 4 weeks of rehearsal before, recording, you get in there and you have an idea of what these characters are, what they do, how they sound, this, that, the other, blah, 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 blah. But then you get in there and all of that just gets absolutely destroyed. And you go, oh, okay, cool. And more often than not, it's like a really fun and interesting thing because people bring things out of characters that you weren't expecting to happen. And so I think it's just about doing your own work with the character, but still being open to allowing whatever comes to come and not getting stifled by it, and just letting those relationships build as they go along.
I suppose it's about trusting your instincts and impulses, isn't it? And just reacting.
Yeah.
Staying with sort of audio work, is there any difference between the preparation you do for audio auditions and screen and stage auditions?
No, I don't think there should be.
Cool.
Really. I mean, obviously the difference is with stage and screen, typically I will be off book, things like that, because especially for theatre, they don't, they don't expect it. But I think you'd be remiss to not learn your lines for an audition unless you're like really pressed for time, and then I think people can understand things. But yeah, I think you still need to go to the same depth of understanding for the character and exploration for who they are and how they see the world and why it is that they say the things that they do or do the things that they do. I think the only difference between audio auditions and theatre or screen is just technique. It's just a technique thing that changes between the three of them, but other than that, I think it would be quite short-minded to think that because you're not learning the lines that you have to do less work. I think every character deserves the same level of input in terms of searching for who they are.
Cool, thank you.
A young actor comes up to you and says, I want to get into the world of audio. What do you recommend they put on their audio reel straight away?
Audio reels. Yeah, I think one thing that people get dragged into a lot and they get sort of pulled in by is the whole thing of accents, right? Especially in the UK. I think the UK drama schools have a really good sort of basis for teaching dialects. and doing things like that. And I think as much as it is great to be able to do accents and, you know, sit in them comfortably, you learn the sort of templates for them and things like that. The thing that's going to set you apart from, you know, another actor is changing the things that people don't think about. Because if I change my accent, I still sound like me, just with a different accent. The thing that makes people different in their sound is their rhythms, their musicality, their tonality, you know, where the sound is created in their mouth, how forward is it, how nasal is it, how, you know, what sort of pauses does your character do, how do they think, where are their filler words, things like that. And I think a huge part of my success when it came to Carlton Hobbs was that I played a lot with those things, especially with musicality, because I ended up having to do about 5 or 6 different accents in my full, like, start to finish process of Carlton Hobbs. And you really do have to sort of find the deeper things that will change it rather than the accent, because the problem is with doing accents is you'll never fully sound like you're from a place until you've found its rhythm, you know. Especially in dialect classes, if you've been in dialect classes, you'll, like, they speak a lot about how things move and, like, about, you know, I don't know, like an example that always sticks in my brain is about Welsh accents, which funnily enough I'm actually really bad at. And they talk about the peaks and the troughs with the Welsh accent, how it goes up and then it comes back down and then it goes back up again. And it's discerning yourself from that. And I think trying to stretch yourself as far as possible to show as much diversity as possible, and not being afraid to play with things that you might think sound silly, things like that. I think obviously as actors, we're all kind of big kids who like to play. But I think sometimes we forget that that's sort of why we started doing this, and we get very, like, very, very serious and forget that, you know, it's okay to be silly and to do things that are different. I think with reels specifically, I feel like I've done a massive tangent, but
tangent away.
I think it's about creating reels for each different path of the audio world. Video games aren't going to be the same as dramas. Dramas aren't going to be the same as commercials. Commercials aren't going to be the same as, I think, what the others are. Essentially, that is it. I mean, I think, yeah, I think the 3 main ones are video games, dramas, and commercials, right? And they all, like, you can hear them. There's, like, it's like if someone just played an audio clip of someone's, like, recording, had no sound, no music, nothing like that, I think just based off tonality and obviously context of what they're saying, but I think you could tell the difference between someone who's doing a drama, someone who's doing a video game, and someone who's doing a commercial. Even if you gave them the same line, I think they will all come out in a completely different way. And so I think with reels, you have to attack those 3 different places in 3 different ways, because I don't think any one will cover them all. I think the drama reel, though, in my opinion, is the most important, because it's the one that's most set in reality, the one that typically has the most depth, and the one that realistically you'll be hired from the most.
Would you recommend people get clips from radio dramas currently, or can it be from a TV or a theatre show that they record as a radio drama for their reel?
That's an interesting question, actually. That's a really good question. As in, do you mean like taking lines from theatre shows?
Yeah, so like, yeah, instead of like a previously recorded radio drama.
I think it can realistically be from anything. I think to be fair, like my drama reel primarily is filled with plays. It's filled with extract from plays. You know, and also my Carlton Hobbs auditions. My speeches were either all plays written by playwrights or written by me. And then my actual live rounds, we did a scene from The Crucible. And then for the individual, we did, and obviously I wouldn't recommend putting this on your reel, but we did extracts from poets. But I think for young actors, if they really want to get into the audio world, it's about practicing those different categories and those different sort of worlds to get used to how they work, how they should sound, really. I think there's nothing more valuable than listening to radio plays to understand what radio plays will sound like, and there's vice versa for video games, commercials, anything like that.
Cool.
That answers the question.
Yeah, thank
Totally.
you. So moving on to more stage work now. You recently did Streetcar at the Sheffield Crucible. In this experience, what differences did you find between a third-year drama school production and working on a professional production in like the rehearsal room and the vibe of that environment? What was different or similar?
You know what? Funnily enough, the first day of a theatre production always feels exactly like the first day of drama school. Like, obviously, it's a bunch of people who don't know each other. You're going into a room and you're like, right, okay, I'm going to be with these people for an extended period of time or this amount of time, whatever. And so it's that thing of, it does feel very similar, very, very similar in terms of like meeting people, getting to know them, this, that, the other. You mesh with certain people. And, you know, I think I've been very lucky that the productions that I've been on, the cast that I've been a part of have all been filled with really, really incredible people, very kind, very generous, very warm. And it's one of those things that I think we worry as actors of, you know, going into a production and potentially not getting on with someone, because if you're stuck with them for a while, then, you know, that can be difficult. I mean, even like my housemate right now is doing a tour of Language and Wardrobe. That's an 18-month contract. If you don't get on with someone for 18 months, that's a long time to not get on with someone, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the differences, I think the biggest difference for me is the level of collaboration in the creative process. I think, especially, I was very fortunate to be a part of the Streetcar cast because it taught me so much about how much control and say we have as actors. I think that was definitely something that I learned that I didn't know about in drama school. I think in drama school, it's very much like you go into it and it's very much like the director's vision, and you sort of sit back and you're like, okay, what would you like? What would you like me to do? I'll do whatever you want, you know? But with professional productions, especially Streetcar, you know, the actors are coming in with such a different depth of understanding of the characters, the play, you know, how things are going on, how they're happening, that when they really do have a strong feeling about how a character should be or how a scene should be or how they should be interacting with something, they're not afraid to speak up, and they're not afraid to input. And at the end of the day, obviously, it does land on the director. That's their job, you know. But I think being a part of the creative process and giving your suggestions about the world, about the characters, things like that, brings you in as an actor so much more, because you then become a part of the creative process rather than just being a passenger. And so, yeah, I think that was the major difference for me, is the level of confidence when it comes to putting out your ideas and them being received or not received. Definitely definitely that. And I think, in all honesty, I think from my experience in drama school, I think the way that they attack a production is not particularly dissimilar, in the sense that even at drama school, you don't have the same director directing you every single time. And so you understand that different directors have different processes. And so it is that thing of just being open to whichever process your director is going to take you down. And if they end up not doing things that you feel like should have been covered, then you just have to do that in your own time. I think that's the other big difference with a professional production, is that you have to really be on top of yourself and on top of, you know, your responsibilities towards the play. And if you feel like something isn't being done, you have to go away and do that yourself. Because obviously everyone else is doing their own thing. And I think with drama school, typically you have the privilege of living with other people, and so you can talk to them about it. But yeah, with professional productions, you end up typically just going back to your own digs and sorting out your own things. From my experience so far, because I'm like, apparently I'm doing a tour of the UK's regional theatres, but you know, yeah, I think those are the biggest differences for me.
You spoke there about working with established actors compared to being in drama school and living with your cohort. How does that relationship change, or how does that dynamic change working with established actors compared to peers at drama school?
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying.
I can imagine.
Terrifying. Do you know what I mean? I've been very fortunate to work with, I mean, with people who I grew up watching, in all honesty, already, and I've been very lucky to have those opportunities. And I think the dynamic is different, obviously. It's obviously very different. When you're at drama school, it's a very much an understanding that you are all peers and you're all here. And I think when it comes to working with established actors, and, you know, obviously the established actors are the ones with the lead roles and the massive amounts of work to do. And so there's a certain sense of, and maybe it's a psychological thing on my part, and I think it's something that definitely sort of simmered down after I, had more experience and went on. But there is a sort of untouchable nature when it comes to them, but they're all different. They're all completely different. And I've been very lucky that I've not worked with anyone yet who's, in my opinion, like a pretty well-established actor who's, been unpleasant or anything like that. Everyone's been very kind and very generous. And, I had the privilege of working with Joanna Vanderham at the Sheffield Crucible doing Streetcar. She played Blanche. And in all honesty, she might have been one of the most captivating human beings I've ever met in my life. Her level of presence and just commitment to the role was something that you realize happens, and like it's something that you strive to do as an actor, but like when you see it for the first time, it's like, and like in person as well, because obviously you see people on movies and the work that they've done for that kind of stuff, but nothing will ever be more palpable than seeing someone on stage going through something as rough as Streetcar. I mean, Streetcar is such an emotionally exhausting and physically exhausting play, especially for whoever has to play Blanche. And Joanna did it with such grace and consistency above all, even through the exhaustion, the level of presence with the other actors, and she always set, like, everyone felt at ease with Joanna when she was on stage, because she's so present with you. And the connection between you and her is so palpable that it kind of just sets you down and brings you down and lets you ground yourself back into the play and into the world. Even if something goes wrong, the way she was so quick to pick up mistakes or, you know, things like that, it's just completely reactive, but she's just so committed to the role and the world that the way she reacts is just completely natural to the character. And that's definitely something that, you know, I think every actor should strive to do, is have that level of presence. But then, yeah, I mean, everyone also works in their own way. Sometimes people need space. Sometimes people love a little chat. Everyone has their own process. I mean, but yeah, sorry, I feel like I went on a tangent again.
No, not at all. I was lost in what you said. It was so good. It was wow.
I find it so interesting how different actors prepare before a show. Like you said, some people want space, they want to lock in with headphones on and listen to like music that resonates with their characters. Some people want to chat and kind of disconnect for a while to almost calm their nerves. Like, what was it like seeing those different preparations from those professional actors before a show? Did they vary, or did you all come together and do something?
Completely. Everyone is so different. I mean, Joanna had a process of listening to music. She had a playlist that she played before, and a playlist she played after. And she used music a lot to get into the world, which I think is fundamentally something that is used a lot, but such a good pathway into the emotion. I think music connects to our brains in a way that's just completely different to anything else. But then, you know, I had, you know, just now coming off of the back of Romeo and Juliet, you know, I had a cast member who before every show did a 10-minute meditation, and another actor who would dance, another actor who would do free throw writing. And then you have actors who don't do anything before, you know, a show. They just sort of sit and prepare themselves, and in like kind of, I don't know, it's very interesting. I think some people sort of need to ramp up, whereas some people just sort of sit and then switch on. And I think it works either way. It works either way completely. I think it just depends on what kind of person you are. And I think also what kind of journey you're going to have to take on the play that you're doing. Because I think also for me, it's always varied. The process of finding and creating a character is always varied, depending on the character, because sometimes certain processes work and sometimes they don't.
You recently filmed Cold Water for ITV. What was the feeling when they called action?
Panic. Panic. With radio plays, you get a read through. With theatre, you get audition, you get, you know, rehearsals. With screen, you just pull up on the day and it just happens. It just happens. I think obviously it's different for each production and each different like screen projects. Sometimes there are read-throughs and sometimes there are rehearsals and things like that. But as of my experience so far, it was literally a turn up, get dressed, put yourself in your position and go. You know, and then you kind of just have to lock in, man. There's no other choice. I think that's kind of another skill that you really have to learn, is not having that, you know, half-hour call, 5-minute call before the start of a show where you can sit there and listen to music and this and that and the other, especially when you're not sort of like in the position where you're lucky enough to be like leading something. I think when you're playing smaller roles, it is sort of like, because with TV, time is money. Every second costs a considerable amount. And then on top of that, you have the restraints of, if you're filming outside, how much sunlight have you got? Are there clouds? Is it going to start raining at a certain time? Will you get the shot all of the shots that you need with the same amount of lighting at within the time? And there's a lot of time pressure on screen sets, because they have so little time to do everything, and because everything costs so much, that you sit there and your entire body is like doing this and freezing until they call action. You're like, right, let's get, you just have to run at it. You haven't got time to be scared. And I think that's also kind of the part that helps as well. I think if anything, the panic sets in more before the action, really. And then you hear the action, and surprisingly, there's something comforting about the action, because then you don't have to worry about, you just have to do it, But yeah, I'd say that sort of the.
Did you have any sort of so when you got there on the day, was there one read through and then call action, or was it nothing? Wow.
Ain't no read through. You know your lines, when it comes in, and you just go. You just go. I think I was actually very fortunate with Cold Water, because I got to film my scene twice. Because what happened was, we filmed it originally in Scotland, and then they sort of were going over everything, and they didn't like it. They didn't like the setting. It didn't, because it's based in London, but it's, it was shot in Scotland predominantly. And so I remember I got a call that they were wanting to completely refilm my entire scene. And so I got a second shot at it, which was really a blessing, because, in all honesty, I was a much worse actor a year ago. I think you learn so much as you come out of drama school, and as you spend more and more time out. You do more and more self-tapes, and you get more and more practice in front of a camera, and you watch yourself and you watch others, and it's so valuable, both sides of it. I think helping another actor with their self-tape is one of the most valuable things that you can do as an actor, because obviously you're helping them, but on the other side, you get to watch, you get to learn, and you get to go, oh, well, that bill felt good for this reason. That didn't quite work. The energy dipped there. This dipped there. But yeah, I was so fortunate to get to film again and to meet Andrew again, who, by the way, is probably one of the nicest human beings you will ever meet in your life, if you get the pleasure of meeting him. Andrew Lincoln is ridiculously warm as a human being. He's very kind. I remember the first time I met him, I was literally sat there in the green room, and they called lunch, and I was like, oh, they're all coming back here. They're all coming back here. And I'm like starting to panic. And I'm like, what's he going to be like? I think by that point, I'd met enough, established actors to sort of be calm and collected in myself. But I actually could never expected him to do the thing that he did, because obviously he's filming this series and he's probably exhausted, and I'm expecting him to come in, sit down, do his own thing. He walks in, he literally shot a look over at me. Before he did anything else, he just came right up to me to introduce himself. And he was just so kind, and warm. And then we ended up having some chats, and then I got to see him again, and have another chat with him when we had the second filming. But yeah, no, it's just in those kind of situations, you kind of have to just do your best to see, because for them, it's just saying hello, innit? Do you know what I mean? But for actors like us, when we're just coming out of drama school, we're just coming into things like this, it's makes your day. Makes your day, something like that. It made my day, that's for sure. Even now, I'm still talking about it. When I first met him was God, it was last year. It was October last year or something like that. Well, we did it all September, maybe, I can't remember. The whole year is just melded into one. I'll be so real with you guys. But yeah, sorry, just keep on going. I just love to yap.
That must have been surreal.
It was surreal. I mean, I've watched growing up, you know, Walking Dead, Love Actually. Like this guy is incredible. He's incredible. He's an incredible actor, and for him to be as kind and warm as he was, was just really left an impact on me. It really did. And even the second time, when we were filming, he'd already been filming like the first half of the scene before I arrived, and he was like in a corner with his headphones in, listening to what I'm not actually sure what he listens to, but he really does look into the zone. But there was one point where he was like crouched down, listening, and then he looked up and he spotted me, and he was like, oh, and he came over. And he like took out his earphones just to say hi again, and just little things. It's just like I don't know. It's just nice, man. And funnily enough, we were both taught by the same voice teacher at drama school, Sue Cowan. Shout out Sue Cowan. She's an absolute god of voice and just an absolute icon.
So you've been out of drama school for over a year now. What have you learned about auditioning that could be helpful for fellow young actors?
Right. I'm going to say something that I think a lot of people might disagree with.
Go on. We're all for spicy takes here.
I think obviously there's a balance. There's a balance to what I'm about to say. There is definitely a balance. But I think the whole thing of 3 takes, ditch it is stupid. I think it's really stupid. In my experience so far, as I've developed and learned and improved at doing specifically self-tapes, I think blocking yourself into doing a certain amount of takes puts a certain pressure, and sometimes that pressure is good, obviously. And I'm not telling people to sit there and do 500 takes, because you'll lose your mind and you'll lose your patience and things like that. But because those kind of things show. The second you start getting frustrated with a scene or frustrated with a text in any way, it shows off in the audition. I'm very lucky to live with 3 other actors, and one of my housemates had filmed a self-tape, and it was a weird one because it was like, one of these ones where it's like 2 lines, but he filmed it probably about 25 times. And by the time he got to the last tape, he was like, yeah, no, that's it. I got it. That's it. I did it. And then he asked me about the tapes, and he asked me to watch them. He had a couple different options, but they were all towards the end of that sort of period of doing that many takes and getting frustrated with the scene. It reads because he was, he ended up rushing and attacking the lines because you're so focused on getting saying the line in the right way, in the right tone, at the right time, the right speed. And then you lose yourself in the sort of frustration of it. And it really does show in the tapes, even if you can't see it. And I think you can't see it in the moment because you've done so many takes that you only see you saying the line in the way that you intended to say it 7 takes ago, But I think it's not worth doing things like that. And which is why I was saying that it's a balance. But something that I found that is incredibly useful is doing a mock trial for self-tapes. if you have the advantage and, privilege of time, obviously it's difficult. People have jobs, people have things to do, but something that I found incredibly useful is doing a tape once, watching it over, leaving it, and then coming back again to do the take again. So you're fresh, you're not tired, you're not exhausted, you're not frustrated, but you've seen what you've done and you can analyze it, see what was right, see what was wrong. I think because even with sometimes all you need is time to see. I think as actors, it's so easy to analyze another person's performance, but so difficult. For me personally, when I first came out of drama school, analyzing my own performance was so difficult because I would sit there and be like, I don't know if that's any good or if that's any bad. I don't know if it worked or if it didn't work. How did it sound? How didn't it sound? And so having the space to do it, go away for a while and then come back is something that I do pretty regularly now. And I think it has stepped up my self-tapes massively. And I think it's this thing of, right, we all shut ourselves down to the premise of spending too much time on self-tapes because we don't want to feel too attached to a role, especially if you're not getting a recall, this or that, the other. And having a balance of, not completely wearing yourself out for one tape. But at the end of the day, a tape is an opportunity to act. So why would you not use the opportunity to workshop the scene, rehearse it, try it again, try it in a way that makes absolutely no sense, but you do it anyways to see if anything comes out of that. And that's something that we've really sort of adopted in this house, of doing a tape. And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But I think predominantly, especially for, heavier, bigger tapes, going back to it afterwards is so, so useful. And just like having the space to absorb everything you've done and watched and then go at it again. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned as an actor self-taping right now in terms of process. And then with self-tapes, the other thing is, and I think they say it at drama school, and I'm going to say it now, and it probably won't absorb into anyone's brains until they've learned it themselves, because it's one of those lessons that I don't think you can learn until you learn it yourself. But they always say at drama school, have hobbies. And I don't think about it in terms of like have hobbies, as in have a life, have creative outlets that can, satisfy your creative brain while you're not taping, so that when you do tape or when you get an opportunity for an audition or anything like that, you're not like gagging and desperate and, everything pins on this audition. Like I've absolutely I've had many moments of doing a tape and getting absolutely absorbed by the fact of like, oh my God, it's filming here and it's for this time and it's for this production company and it's this director, and like, oh my God, I want to do it so bad, and like this and that and the other. And it's like, you just have to let go of all of it. And it's so difficult. And I think people will learn that at different points. But the thing that helped me so much was finding my creative outlet. And that for me is writing. Like, because I'm currently writing a film. And when I started doing that, it's almost like I released a pressure from myself that, I have to bag every audition and I have to bag every job and this and that and the other. I mean, there are actors who won't work for a year and then, they'll completely blow up from one job and then they just consistently work. And there's people who blow up straight away and then they have this absolute cascading effect of just everything going quiet. the acting industry is inherently unpredictable and unstable. And if you're not comfortable with being in that instability, in all respects, I don't think you should be an actor. Because I think the thing to be most wary of as an actor is comfort. I think comfort is a very dangerous thing as an actor. And if you're not comfortable being uncomfortable, then you're going to find yourself having a really tough time.
I think it seems to me that it comes down to trying to be more objective with your work. Like with the doing something once, then coming back to it later. That way you can be more objective and critical of yourself. And like, I think I was talking to you the other day, like we've spoken about before, doing tapes. Often you'll send it off and then you'll watch them again that night and you'll go, I've missed something there. I should have done something. Like I've missed that subtext that was really clear in the first stage direction. I've missed that because I was absorbed in the fact it was a tape. And I think that objectiveness of coming back to it a bit later, if you have the time and the friends to help you do the tape and to do that is a really, really good idea. And I think it's similar again to what you were saying about having a hobby and other creative outlets. It allows you to again be more objective with your acting work, and yeah, so that's really good advice, I think. Yeah.
Obviously it's difficult because some people don't live with other actors, or if you go home and you end up living with your family or anything like that. But it's so useful to develop a relationship with someone, just even if it's one person who you're completely comfortable with them telling you that something was shit. I think we have this whole thing of like actors not directing other actors because it's like rude and like, who are you? And like, why are you going to tell me how I'm doing something or something like that? But I've lived with one of my housemates for 3 years now. And we are so incredibly comfortable with redirecting each other when it comes to like self-tapes and auditions. And there's no sense of defensiveness from either of us. If we ask the other to do something just for the sake of doing it, we do it. Because sometimes it shows you something that you weren't expecting, and having that one person who can just be brutally honest with you and be like, that line was great, that was shit, this didn't land, I don't understand, what were you going for there? It's so useful. It's so useful. You have to let go of your pride. You have to let go of your pride, because at the end of the day, it's about learning. Because sometimes if you can't analyze yourself, having someone else analyze you makes it so much easier to learn how to analyze yourself, because you see what they see through the way that they talk to you about it, And so then you're not in your own head about how you're doing something.
Final question. If you could give one sentence of advice to a young actor entering the industry today, what would it be?
Don't ever be afraid of the hunger or what you're striving for. And never let go of the hunger to continue to grow and learn.
Nuhazet Diaz Cano, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.